My coworker mocked my retirement gift, but he wasn't ready for what was inside. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but mine came wrapped in a cheap plastic box with a ticking clock. I stood awkwardly in the break room, surrounded by coworkers who wore fake smiles like uncomfortable masks. 34 years at Meridian Manufacturing, and this was my send-off. My new manager, Chad, stood at the front, grinning like a game show host. He was 29, cocky, and treated experience like a disease. "Don't worry, Martin," he announced loudly, holding up a small wrapped box. "We didn't spend too much on this. You're retiring, not dying." Laughter rippled through the room. I trained half these people, including Chad himself 5 years ago when he was an eager intern. Now he handed me the gift with theatrical flourish. I unwrapped it slowly, feeling every eye watching. Inside was a cheap plastic watch, the kind you'd find at a dollar store. But it was the engraving that made everyone burst into laughter. "Time's up, Grandpa." The room erupted. Chad high-fived someone. My hands stayed steady, but something inside me shifted forever. The laughter echoed off the walls, bouncing around my skull like bullets. I forced my mouth into something resembling a smile, but I could feel my eyes betraying me. They burned with something I hadn't felt in decades. Pure, concentrated rage. I'd spent 34 years at this company. I'd trained half the engineers in this room, solved problems they couldn't begin to understand, worked weekends and holidays when production lines failed. And this was my reward. Chad leaned close, his cologne too strong, his breath hot against my ear. "Should have retired 10 years ago, old man," he whispered, just loud enough for the people nearby to hear. More snickers followed. That line cut deeper than the engraved insult. It wasn't just disrespect anymore. It was erasure. I excused myself quietly, walking toward the restroom with measured steps. Inside the stall, I let my hands tremble for exactly 30 seconds. Then I steadied them, splashed cold water on my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. The old Martin would have let this go. I walked back into that break room with my head high. They'd moved on already, chatting about weekend plans and sports games. I gave my retirement speech calmly, thanking everyone for the years, the memories, the lessons learned together. My voice never wavered. I held up the plastic watch and said, "This will remind me every day of my time here." Some people laughed again, thinking I was being a good sport. Chad smirked from the back, arms crossed. I gathered my things, shook a few genuine hands, and walked out the front door for what everyone assumed was the last time. Outside, the autumn air hit my face. I stood by my car, looking back at the building where I'd spent most of my adult life. The plastic watch sat in my palm, light as a feather, heavy as a stone. I muttered quietly to myself, words no one else could hear. "You shouldn't have done that, Chad." My tone wasn't angry. It was resolved, certain, and absolutely final. At home that evening, I sat in my study with a glass of whiskey I didn't drink. My wife had passed 3 years ago, so the house stayed quiet except for the hum of my old company laptop booting up. I kept it against protocol, knowing this day might come. I opened an encrypted folder I'd been maintaining for years, a digital insurance policy I'd hoped never to use. Inside were hundreds of files, data logs showing safety violations, emails where Chad approved dangerous shortcuts to boost production numbers, and video footage from security cameras I'd quietly copied. Every corner cut, every regulation ignored, every falsified maintenance report, all documented with timestamps and signatures. I'd been gathering evidence for 3 years, ever since Chad became manager and started prioritizing profit over safety. I smiled quietly at the screen. "You wanted a show, kid," I whispered. "You'll get one." The next morning, before I officially turned in my badge, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Martin Hayes?" a professional voice asked. "This is Patricia from Kellerman Industries. We worked together 6 years ago on the quality audit project." I remembered her. Sharp, thorough, no nonsense. "We're looking for a temporary safety consultant for a major client. The pay is substantial and it's only 3 months. Are you interested?" I asked which client. There was a pause. Actually, it's Meridian Manufacturing. They need an external audit for their upcoming certification renewal. The irony was so perfect I almost laughed. The universe was handing me the keys to Chad's kingdom. When do I start? I asked. Patricia sounded relieved. Next Monday. I'll send the contract today. After I hung up, I sat there for a full minute, processing the beautiful symmetry of it all. They'd kicked me out the front door. I'd be walking back in through the boardroom. The following Monday, I walked into Meridian Manufacturing wearing a visitor's badge and carrying a leather briefcase. The security guard did a double take. Mr. Hayes? I thought you retired. I smiled. I did. Now I'm a consultant. I could see him processing this information as I signed in. The elevator ride-up felt different. I wasn't an employee anymore. I was an auditor, and that meant access to everything. When I reached the engineering floor, heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. I walked past my old desk, now occupied by someone younger, and headed straight to the conference room where Chad was holding his morning meeting. I opened the door without knocking. Chad's jaw literally dropped. His coffee cup paused halfway to his mouth. "Morning, gentlemen," I said pleasantly, setting my briefcase down. "I'm Martin Hayes, your external safety consultant for the certification audit. I'll be here for the next 3 months." Chad's face went through several colors. "Surprised to see me?" I asked. Nobody answered. The tables had just turned. Over the next few days, I moved through the building like a ghost with authority. My consultant badge gave me access to restricted areas, confidential files, and management meetings. Chad couldn't say no without raising suspicion. I planted small, hidden cameras in strategic locations. The maintenance storage room where falsified reports were filed, the corner of Chad's office where he held his inner circle meetings, and near the production floor where safety protocols were routinely ignored. The cameras were tiny, professional grade, and completely legal under audit provisions. Each evening, I reviewed the footage at home. One clip showed Chad laughing with his team about how safety inspections are just theater. Another caught him literally signing off on maintenance records for equipment that hadn't been serviced in 8 months. The third showed him coaching a subordinate to backdate inspection stamps. Each video was more damning than the last. I organized them chronologically in a folder labeled Evidence. The audience to this drama didn't exist yet, but they would soon enough. By Wednesday, word had spread through the building. The old man was back, and he wasn't just visiting. Whispers followed me through hallways. "He's doing a full audit. Corporate sent him. They're checking everything." I saw fear in faces that had laughed at me 10 days ago. Chad's buddies, the ones who'd high-fived him at my retirement party, now looked nervous during meetings. They started actually following safety protocols when I was nearby. Chad himself tried to act casual, but I noticed his tells. The way he checked his phone constantly, the tension in his jaw, the sweat on his forehead during inspections. He cornered me by the coffee machine on Thursday. "This is just routine, right?" he asked, trying to sound friendly. "Standard certification stuff?" I stirred my coffee slowly. "It's as thorough as it needs to be," I replied, meeting his eyes. "Why? Is there something I should know about?" He laughed, but it sounded hollow. No, everything's fine. Buy the book." "Good," I said. "That's what I'm here to verify." On Friday afternoon, 2 executives from corporate headquarters arrived unannounced. I watched them through the conference room glass, talking intensely with the plant manager. Chad wasn't invited to the meeting, which clearly bothered him. He paced outside, trying to look busy. What Chad didn't know was that I'd sent an anonymous email to corporate 3 days earlier. Nothing accusatory, just a simple question. When was the last independent audit of the Meridian plant's safety protocols? Some documentation appears inconsistent. Corporate hated inconsistencies. They meant liability, lawsuits, and bad press. The executives stayed for 2 hours, reviewing files and asking pointed questions. I played dumb when they interviewed me, a harmless old consultant just doing his job. But I'd left certain documents on top of certain piles, flagged certain pages with innocent-looking sticky notes. After they left, Chad frantically called a meeting with his team. Through my hidden camera, I watched him bark orders. Fix the paperwork. Update everything. Make it all match. In his panic, he was creating even more evidence of falsification. By the second week, Chad was getting desperate. He couldn't attack me directly without looking guilty, so he started a smear campaign instead. Rumors began circulating that I'd leaked confidential company information to competitors, that I was bitter about retirement and trying to sabotage the plant, that I couldn't accept the new generation's way of doing things. I heard the whispers, saw the suspicious looks. Some people who'd respected me started keeping their distance. Human Resources scheduled a formal hearing for the following Monday. The email said they needed to address concerns about consultant conduct and potential breaches of confidentiality. I read it twice, then smiled. Chad thought he was being clever, turning the tables before I could spring my trap. What he didn't understand was that I'd been building toward this moment from the beginning. The hearing wasn't a threat to my plan. It was the perfect stage for the final act. I spent the weekend organizing my evidence into a presentation, complete with timestamps, cross-references, and legal citations. My briefcase felt heavier on Monday morning, weighted with justice. If you're enjoying the story so far, please take a moment to like this story and also hit the subscribe button to get notified of our new series. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and cold rain. I dressed carefully in my best suit, the one I'd worn to my wife's funeral. It felt appropriate somehow, like I was burying something today. The hearing was scheduled for 10 o'clock in the main conference room. I arrived 15 minutes early, carrying my briefcase and a flash drive in my pocket. The HR manager, Susan, was already there, looking uncomfortable. She'd worked at Meridian for 12 years and knew my reputation. "Martin," she said quietly, "I want you to know this isn't personal. We have to investigate all allegations." I nodded. I understand completely. I'd expect nothing less. Chad arrived exactly at 10, flanked by two of his loyalists. He wore confidence like cheap cologne, too much and obvious to everyone. He thought he'd already won this. The plant manager sat at the head of the table, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Let's begin," Susan said, opening her folder. "Mr. Brennan has raised concerns about consultant Hayes potentially violating confidentiality agreements." I raised my hand politely. "Before we address that, may I present some relevant context?" I pulled the flash drive from my pocket and held it up. "Everything I'm about to show you is legally obtained under my consultant agreement, which grants full audit access to all facilities and records. I've violated nothing." I plugged it into the conference room computer. The screen flickered to life. The first video showed Chad in his office, feet on his desk, talking to his assistant manager. The audio was crystal clear. "These safety reports are just theater," he said, laughing. "Corporate never actually reads them. We just need signatures and dates. Make it look good." I let it play for 30 seconds, then paused it. The room was absolutely silent. Susan's face had gone pale. The plant manager leaned forward, eyes fixed on the screen. "That's taken out of context," Chad stammered. "I was joking. It was..." I played the next clip without responding. This one showed Chad literally forging a supervisor's signature on a maintenance log. The timestamp showed it was from 3 weeks ago. "Still joking?" I asked quietly. I played 12 more videos, each more damning than the last. The final clip was the most devastating. It showed Chad in a private conversation with his closest ally, Mark, discussing what to do if the audit found problems. Chad's voice came through the speakers clearly. "Even if we get caught, I'll just blame it on the old guy. Martin's already retired. He's got no credibility anymore. They'll believe me over him." He laughed, that same arrogant sound from my retirement party. "By the time anyone figures it out, he'll be too old to fight back." The video ended. I ejected the flash drive and placed it on the table. Susan looked like she might be sick. The plant manager's hands were clenched into fists. Chad had turned an interesting shade of gray. "That's edited," he tried weakly. "You can't trust. Every file has metadata," I interrupted calmly. "Original timestamps, unedited footage, all available for forensic analysis." I also have the camera serial numbers and chain of custody documentation. Would you like me to provide that now? Or should we continue? Nobody spoke. The silence stretched like pulled taffy, uncomfortable and sticky. Finally, Susan cleared her throat. Mr. Brennan, you're suspended immediately pending a full investigation. Chad was escorted from the building within the hour. I watched from the window as security walked him to his car. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. But I wasn't finished. Not even close. That afternoon, from my home computer, I accessed an anonymous email account I'd created weeks earlier. I sent a comprehensive report to 3 destinations: the State Safety Board, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and a journalist I knew who specialized in corporate negligence stories. The report included every piece of evidence, carefully organized and explained. I didn't include my name anywhere. The email signature simply read, "A concerned industry professional." By evening, my phone buzzed with news alerts. The journalist worked fast. The headline read, "Major manufacturing plant under investigation for systematic safety violations." The article didn't name Meridian yet, but industry insiders would recognize the details. I poured myself that glass of whiskey I'd left untouched before. This time I drank it. Tasted like victory, smooth and burning all at once. If you're enjoying this story so far, please take a moment to like this story and also hit the subscribe button to get notified of our new series. By Wednesday, the story had exploded across industry news sites and local media. Engineer exposes massive safety fraud at manufacturing giant, read one headline. Whistleblower reveals years of falsified safety records, proclaimed another. Meridian stock price dropped 14% in a single day. The company's communications team scrambled to contain the damage, issuing vague statements about thorough internal reviews and commitment to safety excellence. But the details kept leaking. Someone, probably from the state board, had shared information with reporters. Now the public knew about the forged signatures, the backdated maintenance logs, the ignored safety violations. Chad's name appeared in several articles, though carefully worded to avoid libel. The internet did the rest. His LinkedIn profile was flooded with angry comments. Someone found his social media accounts and shared screenshots of him bragging about bonuses and promotions. The circle of humiliation was complete, but amplified 1,000 times beyond that break room party. I drove past the Meridian plant that afternoon. News vans lined the street. Reporters interviewed employees as they left for the day. The building looked smaller, somehow diminished. Thursday morning, I received an urgent call from the CEO's office. I was requested, not required, to attend an emergency board meeting at 2 o'clock. When I arrived, the boardroom felt like a courtroom. 8 board members sat around the massive table, their faces grave. The CEO, Mr. Harrington, looked like he'd aged 5 years in a week. "Mr. Hayes," he began formally, "we need to understand exactly how this situation developed." I spent 2 hours walking them through everything. Not just Chad's fraud, but the history behind it. How I'd reported safety concerns 3 years ago when Chad first became manager. How those reports were dismissed as old-school thinking and resistance to change. How I documented everything because I knew someday it would matter. "I gave you chances to fix this internally," I said, my voice steady but firm. "Multiple chances. You ignored me because I was close to retirement and Chad was bringing in profits. Well, now you have a choice. Fix it properly, or watch this company collapse under lawsuits and criminal investigations." The boardroom went silent. They knew I was right. The truth hung in the air like smoke, impossible to ignore. The truly ironic part emerged during that board meeting. The company's safety certification, the one I was originally hired to audit, was coming up for renewal in 6 weeks. Chad had been in charge of the renewal process. Now, reviewing his work, the board discovered he'd falsified most of the required documentation. The certification was invalid. Without it, Meridian couldn't fulfill any of its major contracts. Millions of dollars hung in the balance, potentially tens of millions in penalties and lost business. "How bad is it?" the CFO asked. The head of operations looked sick. "Every major client requires valid certification. If we can't renew in time, we'll be in breach of contract with at least 15 major accounts. They all looked at each other, then at me. I knew what was coming. I'd known for weeks. Mr. Hayes, the CEO said carefully, you know our systems better than anyone. You know what needs to be fixed and how to fix it. The original consulting firm has pulled out due to the scandal. We need someone we can trust. He paused. We need you. The offer was substantial. Return as senior safety consultant for 6 months, full authority to implement changes, and a compensation package triple my previous salary, plus a formal apology from the board for dismissing my earlier concerns. I let them sweat for a full minute before responding. I'll help, I said finally, but under my terms. I laid them out. Complete transparency, direct reporting to the board, authority to terminate any employee who violated protocols, and a written guarantee that all my recommendations would be implemented without interference. And one more thing, I added. I want a formal position created, Director of Safety Integrity, independent of operations, permanent role, reporting directly to the board. If you want to prevent this from happening again, you need someone with authority who can't be bullied by managers chasing profit numbers. The CEO didn't hesitate. Done. All of it. When can you start? I smiled slightly. I never really stopped. The balance of power had shifted completely. I wasn't the old man being forced out anymore. I was the authority everyone answered to. While I was being offered my new position, Chad's world was crumbling. The state investigation had expanded into criminal fraud charges. Federal regulators got involved because some of the falsified equipment had crossed state lines. His lawyer advised him to cooperate, but there wasn't much he could cooperate with. The evidence was overwhelming and meticulously documented. His wife left him, according to mutual acquaintances. His parents stopped returning his calls, ashamed of the news coverage. He'd gone from rising star to industry pariah in less than 2 weeks. One evening, my phone rang. Unknown number again, but this time I recognized the area code. I let it go to voicemail. Chad's voice came through, hoarse and desperate. Martin, please. I know I was wrong. I was arrogant and stupid. But they're destroying me. I need help. Just one character reference. Please. I'm begging you. I listened to the message twice, then deleted it. Poetic justice doesn't require cruelty, but it also doesn't require mercy. Sometimes the consequences speak for themselves. I kept the cheap plastic watch on my desk in my new office. But I'd done something to it. Replaced the flimsy band with a proper gold one I'd had custom made. The watch itself was still worthless. Still said, "Time's up, Grandpa" on the inside. But now it sat in a small glass case with a brass plaque beneath it. A reminder that respect is earned, not given. Time always tells the truth. Visitors to my office always asked about it. I'd tell them the story, edited slightly, emphasizing the lesson rather than the revenge. The watch became something of a legend around the company. New employees heard about it during orientation. Managers referenced it when talking about integrity. What had been meant as a humiliating joke had transformed into a symbol of accountability. The irony was perfect. Chad's cruelty had created the very icon that would ensure his type of management never took root at Meridian again. Sometimes the best revenge is taking poison and turning it into medicine. But there was one detail I'd never told anyone. A secret that made the whole story even more perfect. The afternoon before my retirement party, I'd known something was wrong. I'd overheard Chad and his friends planning to give me a memorable send-off. So I'd done something unusual. I'd bought an identical cheap watch, engraved it myself with the same cruel message, and placed it in a gift box. But beneath the foam padding, hidden in a small compartment I'd carved out, I'd placed a USB drive. That drive contained encrypted copies of every piece of evidence I'd been collecting. The safety violations, the falsified reports, the financial discrepancies. When Chad gave me that gift at the party, he'd unknowingly handed me the smoking gun that would later destroy him. The USB drive I'd used during the hearing, that was the same drive from the retirement gift, just in a different case. The universe hadn't handed me revenge. I'd engineered it, planned it, and executed it with the same precision I'd brought to 34 years of engineering work. 3 months after the scandal broke, Meridian held a special company meeting. The entire staff gathered in the main auditorium, something that hadn't happened in years. The CEO stood at the podium, looking more humble than I'd ever seen him. 3 months ago, this company nearly collapsed due to systematic safety violations and fraud, he began. We were saved by the integrity of one man who refused to let profit override principle. He gestured toward me in the front row. Martin Hayes could have simply enjoyed his retirement. Instead, he risked his reputation to expose the truth and then helped rebuild what had been broken. The company announced they were donating my entire consulting bonus, over $200,000, to a new safety training program named in my honor. The money would fund ongoing education for engineers and managers about ethical responsibility and safety protocols. I hadn't asked for this. In fact, I tried to refuse the bonus entirely. But the board insisted on the donation program as a way to turn scandal into positive change. The applause lasted a full minute. It felt different from the fake applause at my retirement party. If you're enjoying the story so far, please take a moment to like this story and also hit the subscribe button to get notified of our new series. For months after everything imploded, I was home on a Saturday afternoon when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the window, I saw a figure I barely recognized. Chad, but different. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by worn jeans and a wrinkled shirt. His hair was longer, unkempt. He'd lost weight and not in a healthy way. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. Martin, he said, his voice cracking slightly. I know I have no right to be here. I need to explain. I need you to understand that I'm not that person anymore. The trial is next month. If you could just write a character reference, tell them I've learned, that I'm different. He trailed off, seeing my expression. I already gave a character reference, I said quietly. You did. Hope flared in his eyes. When? During the hearing. The footage spoke louder than I ever could. I paused. You wanted me to know my place, Chad. Now you know yours. I closed the door gently. Not a slam, not angry. Just final. 6 weeks later, I sat in my favorite cafe reading the morning newspaper. The headline on page 3 caught my eye. Former manufacturing manager pleads guilty to multiple fraud charges. The article detailed Chad's sentencing. 3 years in federal prison, massive fines, and permanent barring from holding management positions in any regulated industry. His lawyer had negotiated the plea deal to avoid a longer trial and harsher sentence. I folded the paper and set it aside. On my wrist was the plastic watch, now with its gold band, still ticking steadily. The second hand moved with perfect precision, each tick marking another moment of accountability. A young couple at the next table noticed the watch and the unusual combination of cheap plastic and expensive gold. That's an interesting watch, the woman said politely. I smiled. It's a gift. Someone once told me my time was up. Turned out they were talking about themselves. I finished my coffee, left a generous tip, and walked out into the sunshine. The watch kept ticking, steady as a heartbeat, loud as justice. Some months have passed now, and I still work as Director of Safety Integrity at Meridian. The culture has changed completely. Managers focus on sustainable practices rather than quick profits. Safety violations get reported immediately, no matter who's responsible. New employees learn about ethics and accountability from day one. And in the lobby, there's now a display case containing that plastic watch with the gold band. Beneath it, a plaque reads, "Respect isn't given by title. It's earned by integrity." Some people never learn that lesson until their time runs out. I narrate this story sometimes to new engineers during their orientation. I tell them about humiliation turned into purpose, about documentation and patience, about how the truth always emerges if you protect it long enough. They listen carefully, these young people who remind me of who I was decades ago. I hope they remember it when they face their own Chads, their own moments of decision. The watch still ticks on my wrist as I tell the story. Time moves forward for everyone. The question is, what will you do with yours? The screen fades on the steady tick-tick-tick, the ultimate symbol of justice, patience, and perfect timing.